Hello, I'm Jerry McGonnigal. I'm the Artistic Director of West Virginia Public Theater. These are challenging times that we're in. We've struggled hard to figure out how to keep our holiday tradition alive during a pandemic. We've struggled with how to keep it safe, how to do it safely. We want to make it available to as many people as possible during a time when people can't get out and intermingle in the way they're used to. We wanted to contribute, as we always do, to the collective holiday spirit, and particularly in a time now when it's most needed. So we came up with an idea based on an old tradition. Today you're going to get to experience with us our brand new adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, adapted as a radio play in the live reading situation. So enjoy it, and if you're moved by the holiday spirit, the ghost that you're going to hear and experience, then go to our website, wvpublictheater.org, make a holiday donation. Keep theater alive. We'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, and now welcome to A Christmas Carol.
Joyful and triumphant, O come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. O come, let us adore him. O come, let us adore him. O come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord.
Molly was dead. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed
by the clergy, the clerk,
the Undertaker,
and the chief mourner.
Scrooge signed the register as well, and Scrooge's name was good for anything he chose to put his hands to.
Old Marley was as dead as a doornail.
Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, in my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade.
You will therefore allow me to repeat, emphatically, that Molly was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story we are about to relate.
Scrooge knew he was dead.
Of course I did. Molly and I were partners for I don't know how many years.
Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend.
Scrooge was not, however, so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, celebrating the solemn event with an undoubted bargain.
Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, covetous old sinner.
Hard and sharp as flint, secret, self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him.
Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?"
But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance.
Now, back to the story we are conveying. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. The door of the Scrooge's office was open that he might keep an eye upon Mr. Bob Cratchit, his clerk, who was in a dismal little cell, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was very much smaller, that it looked like one coal. As Cratchit was wrapping himself in a white comforter and attempting to warm himself at his candle, The counting-house door was thrown open, and a cheerful voice of Scrooge's nephew Fred rang out.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
Bah! Humbug.
Christmas a humbug, Uncle. You don't mean that, I am sure.
I do, nephew. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then, what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, Scrooge said,
Bah! Humbug.
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What is Christmas to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it has ever done you, much good may it do you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. Christmas among the rest. And while it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it.
The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Scrooge's gaze fell upon the clerk.
Let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep Christmas by losing your situation.
Yes, sir.
Now, you're quite a powerful speaker, nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
You'll sooner see me in hell.
But why? Uncle, why?
Why did you get married, nephew?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon!
His nephew left the room without an angry word. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk.
Merry Christmas to you and your family, Mr. Cratchit.
And to you and yours, sir.
There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam.
The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They both now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt that his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner.
At this festive time of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
Well, they are. Still, I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor, then?
Both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
Oh, you wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
I think that's a bit harsh, sir.
This is not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the brightness of the shops, where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. A group of cheery carolers could be heard singing as come along in the lane.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day, to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
Scrooge paid them little mind as they passed by, but all on a sudden, a small voice could be heard outside the counting-house door, as if singing directly into the keyhole.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing
Scrooge
you
seized the
dismay.
steady wooden ruler
Remember
and,
born
growling
on
out an
Christmas Day.
unintelligible warning, made for the door with such speed and menace that the young singer fled in terror. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill-will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet, you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning.
Yes, sir. Of course, sir.
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill 20 times in honor of its being Christmas Eve, and then he ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play at blind man's bluff.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay.
Scrooge, on the other hand, took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, he went to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. Oh, they were a gloomy suite of rooms in a large, miserable house. Nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Now, let anyone explain to me, if they can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw the knocker without its undergoing any intermediate process of change. Not a knocker, but Molly's face.
Molly's face?
Well, it was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Molly used to look. The hair was curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. As Scrooge looked at this phenomenon, it was the knocker again. Not to say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, lighted a candle,
Bah! Bah!
and closed the door with a bang. Up into the dark and gloom went Scrooge, not caring a button for either.
Darkness is cheap. I like it.
But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that.
Sitting room, bedroom, closet, all as they should be. Nothing under the bed. Nothing under the sofa. Nothing hiding in this suspicious dressing gown hanging by the bed.
Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in. Double-locked himself, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel.
Humbug.
As he sat back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell that hung disused in the corner. Oh, it was with great astonishment that, as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. Well, this might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the sounds much louder, on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
His color changed, though, when without a pause it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up and fell again.
I know him. It's Marley's ghost.
The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. The long chain he dragged behind him was clasped around his middle. It was made of cash boxes and keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it.
You don't believe in me?
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Say, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness.
You are fettered. Tell me why.
I wear this chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and the length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebeneezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me! In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me.
7 years dead and traveling the whole time?
The whole time. No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse.
You travel fast.
On the wings of the wind.
You must have been very slow about it, Jacob. You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years.
Oh! Captive bound and double-ironed. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunity misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Hear me! My time is nearly gone.
I will, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray.
How it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. That is no light part of my penance. But I am here to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring Ebeneezer.
You were always a good friend to me, Jacob. Thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I have them all at once and have it over,
Expect
Jacob?
the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, Ebeneezer.
The apparition walked backward from him, and every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. As Scrooge watched, they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And being from the emotions he had undergone, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12. Then stopped.
12? It was past 2 when I went to bed. 12? Why, it isn't possible that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. Oh, it isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon?
He scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running to and fro. Now Scrooge went to bed again and thought it over and over and over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Scrooge lay in this state until the chime had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered on a sudden that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past.
Quarter past. Half past. Quarter to it. The hour itself. And nothing else.
Scrooge spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of the bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so much like a child as like an old man. Well, its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white, as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound with a lustrous belt. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and, in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past.
No, your past.
What business has brought you here, spirit?
Your welfare.
I am much obliged, but perhaps a good night's rest might be more...
Take heed. Rise and walk with me.
But I am a mortal, and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold, wintry day with snow upon the ground.
Good heaven! I know this. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
It is nothing, nothing. Lead on, spirit, lead me where you would.
You recollect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfold.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate, post, and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies were now seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. Forgetting himself in a moment's cheer, Scrooge cried out,
Hello! Hello there!
These are but shadows of the things that have been.
They have no consciousness of us.
Leaving the high road and down a well-remembered lane, there stood a mansion of dull red brick, with a little cupola on the roof and a bell hanging in it.
The school is not quite deserted. A solitary boy, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know it. I wish... Oh, but it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
As Scrooge and the ghost observed the lonely boy pensively pacing up and down, the door flew open, and a little girl came darting in. Putting her arms around his neck and often kissing him, she exclaimed,
"Dear, dear brother, I have come to bring you home. To bring you home, home, home."
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home for good and all. Home for ever and ever. Oh, Father is so much kinder than he used to be, that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. Oh, and you're to be a man, and are never to come back here. But first, we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world.
You are quite a woman, little Fan.
Scrooge and the spirit watched as if from a perch high above, Fan laughing gaily, taking her much taller brother by the hand and pulling him through the icy halls of the old school toward the front door and the carriage waiting outside.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered. But she had a large heart.
So she had. You're right. I'll not gainsay it, Spirit, God forbid.
She died a woman, and had, as I think, children.
One child.
True, your nephew.
Yes.
In that very instant, they left the school behind them, and they were now standing before a certain warehouse door.
Do you know this place?
Know it? I was apprenticed here.
They went in, at sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind such a high desk, Scrooge cried out in excitement.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again.
Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out,
"Yo-ho there, Ebeneezer! Dick!"
Scrooge's former self, now a grown man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, yes, there he is.
Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight. It's Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebeneezer. Let's have the shutters up before a man can say Jack Robinson. Hilly-ho, clear away, me lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick, cheer up, Ebeneezer.
It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon a fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with the music book, and off he went up to the lofty desk. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow.
Come in and welcome all. Tonight we shall have dances, and there will be playing at forfeits, and then more dances. We will have cake and strong punch, and there will be a great piece of cold roast and plenty of beer.
When the clock finally struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. As Scrooge and the spirit looked on, the two apprentices lay exhausted in their beds.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps.
It isn't that. It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. Well, what then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it costs a fortune.
What is the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No. I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all.
My time grows short. Quick!
Again, Scrooge saw himself in another place. He was older now, a man in his prime of his life. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in his eye, which showed the new passion that had taken root. He was not alone, but sat by the side of Belle, a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears.
Ebeneezer, I can see that another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has replaced you, Belle?
A golden one.
Is this the even-handed dealing of the world? There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much, Ebeneezer. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed toward you, am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words? No, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? No.
You think not?
I would gladly think otherwise if I could. If you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You, who in your very confidence weigh everything by gain. Or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so. Do I not know your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more.
No more. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
Once again, in the flash of an eye, they were in another scene and place. A room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last vision that Scrooge believed it was the same until he saw her now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. But now a knocking on the door was heard, and in came the father. Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever. He thought that such another young family might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life. At this musing, his sight grew very dim indeed.
Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Who was it?
Yes.
How can I? I don't know. Mr. Scrooge?
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window. He had a candle inside, and I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear. And there he sat, alone. Quite alone in the world.
Spirit, remove me from this place.
I told you these were shadows of the things that have been. That they are what they are, do not blame me.
Remove me! I cannot bear it. Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer!
Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own bedroom, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1, and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. After a moment, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called to him by his name and bade him enter.
Come in, Ebeneezer. Come in and know me better, man.
He obeyed. Well, it was his own room, there was no doubt about that. Oh, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, and an array of steaming plum puddings. In an easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me.
Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe, bordered with white fur. The garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare. Its feet were also bare, and on its head wore a holly wreath. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face and its joyful air.
You have never seen the likes of me before.
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. But I went forth last night on compulsion and learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and held fast. The room vanished instantly, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs. The sky was gloomy, and there was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad. For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops, they were jovial and full of glee. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiters were radiant in their glory. The customers were all so hurried and so eager in the hopeful promise of the day. But soon the steeples called all good people to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. Perhaps it was the pleasure of the good spirit in showing off his powers, or else it was his own kind, generous, hearty nature and a sympathy with all poor men that led him straight to Scrooge's clerks.
Whatever has got your precious father, then? And your brother, Tiny Tim? And Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour.
Oh, here's Martha, Mother. Hurrah! Oh, there's such a goose, Martha.
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are.
We'd a deal of work to finish up last night and had to clear away this morning.
Well, never mind, so long as you are come. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless ye.
No. There's Father coming. Hide, Martha, hide.
So Martha hid herself, and in came Bob in his threadbare clothes with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, for he bore a little crutch and had his legs supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming? Not coming upon Christmas Day?
Oh, Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, as it was only a joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door.
Here I am, Father.
The two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash-house, that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper.
And how did little Tim behave, my dear?
As good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you have ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
An active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to the stool before the fire. Peter went to fetch the goose. With such high procession, Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot. Martha mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Belinda sweetened up the applesauce, and Bob took Tiny Tim beside him to a corner at the table. All this was succeeded by a breathless pause as Mrs. Cratchit prepared to plunge the knife into the breast of the goose. But when she did, one great murmur of delight arose all around the board, and even Tiny Tim beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried,
Hurrah! There never was such a goose.
But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding.
Oh, a wonderful pudding. Quite possibly the greatest success achieved by your mother since she married me.
Oh. At last, the dinner was all done, the cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. Then all the Cratchit family drew round Bob in a circle as he proposed.
Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No. No. Oh, no, kind spirit. Say that he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Man, if man you be in heart, forbear that wicked cant, until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child.
A toast. Mr. Scrooge. I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink to his health for your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood in a bright, dry, gleaming room. Having so quickly left the somber confines of the Cratchit abode, It was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh, and it was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's.
And he said that Christmas was a humbug. As I live. And he believed it too.
Oh, shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth. And not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
Oh, what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He doesn't have the satisfaction of thinking that he is ever going to benefit us with it.
Oh, I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner. Very true, dear.
Only going to say that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. But I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help but thinking better of it. I defy him if he finds me going there year after year and saying, "Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge." If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something.
Enough about Uncle Scrooge. Let's have a song.
And the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. For the rising of the sun, and the running of the deer, the playing of the merry organ, sweet singing in the choir.
There were many songs and tea. They played games. There was first a game of blind man's bluff. Scrooge's niece was made comfortable with a large chair and a footstool in a snug corner, where the ghost and Scrooge were behind her. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played. And so did Scrooge, quite forgetting that his voice made no sound in their ears.
Oh, here is a new game. 1/2 hour more, Spirit, only one.
It was a game called Yes or No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was.
Is it an animal?
Yes.
A live animal.
Yes.
A disagreeable animal.
Yes.
Does it growl and grunt?
Yes.
Does it live in London?
Yes.
Is it made a show of?
No.
Does it live in a menagerie?
No.
Is it a horse?
No.
An ass?
No.
A bear.
No.
I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's your Uncle Scrooge. You really should have said yes to a bear then.
Yes. You have got it. He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure, and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it, nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge.
Suddenly, the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Oh, much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. It was a long night, and while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older.
Our spirits' lives so short.
My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight. Tonight at midnight. The time is drawing near.
Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts.
Look here. Oh man, look here, look down here.
From the folding of its robe, it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. There were a boy and a girl, where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints. A stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds.
Spirit, are they yours?
They are man's, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both in all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom. Unless the writing be erased, deny it, slander those who tell it ye, admit it for your factious purpose, and make it worse, and bide the end.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which, it concealed its face, its head, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. It was tall and stately when it came beside him, and its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received.
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit.
The phantom moved away, and Scrooge followed in its shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, but there they were, in the heart of it. The merchants hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
Who knows?
What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know.
It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life I don't know anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer.
I don't mind going if lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one.
Well, I am the most disinterested among you after all, for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met.
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The ghost gave none, but pointed onward. They then left the busy scene and went onto an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never penetrated, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Sitting among the wares by the charcoal stove was a gray-haired rascal who smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. She had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man faded in black.
Let the charwoman alone to be the first. Let the laundress alone to be the second. And let the Undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here. Oh, Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlour. Come into the parlour.
The parlor was the space behind a screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair rod. The woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance at the other two.
What odds, then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did.
That's true indeed. No man more so.
Why then? Don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose.
No, indeed.
We should hope not.
Very well, then. That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, the wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying, gasping out his last there, alone by himself.
It's the truest word that ever was spoke. It's a judgment on him.
Oh, I wish it was a little heavier judgment. And it should have been, you may depend upon it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it.
No,
and then you can open up mine. Let me know how much I'm taking
Get
over.
off it.
But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the Undertaker's man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive, a seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all.
That's your account. I wouldn't give another fixed sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next? Miss Dilber. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown.
And now, undo my bundle, Joe.
Joe unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
What do you call this? Bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not? I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching it out for the sake of such a man as he was. I promise you, Joe. Oh, don't drop that oil upon the blankets now.
His blankets? I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?
Oh, no, you'd be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I loiter about him for such things if he did. Ah, you may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. He viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater if they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself.
Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven! What is this?
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up, which announced itself in awful language. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. A cat could be heard tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think.
Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go.
Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head.
I understand you, and I would do it, if I could. But I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power. Please, if there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit. I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it revealed a room by daylight, where a young woman stood. She was expecting someone, and with an anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out the window, glanced at the clock, tried in vain to work her needle. At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, which he struggled to repress.
Is it good or bad?
Bad?
We are quite ruined.
No, there is hope yet, Carolyn.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope, if such a miracle has happened.
He's past relenting. He's dead.
Dead?
The half-drunken woman who I told you of last night said to me, when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time, we should be ready with the money. And even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Carolyn.
The only emotion that the ghost could show him caused by the event was one of pleasure.
Let me see some tenderness connected with the death, or that dark chamber, Spirit, which we left just now, will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely it was very quiet. The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face.
Mother?
The color hurts my eyes. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time.
Past it, rather. But I think he has walked a little slower than usual these last evenings, Mother.
I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble. And there is your father at the door.
She hurried out to meet him. Little Bob and his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. When the two young Cratchits got upon his knees, each laid each child's little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, Father. Don't be grieved."
You went today, then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little, little child. My little child.
In time they drew about the fire and talked. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked just a little down, you know, said Bob, inquired what had happened to distress him.
On which, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you have ever heard, I told him of Tim. I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Oh, everybody knows that.
Very well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of any service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray, come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be surer of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Only hear that, Peter.
And then Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself.
I'll get along with you.
It's just as likely as not one of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whenever we part from one another, I am sure that we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us.
Never, Father.
And when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little, little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
No, never, Father.
Never.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, though at a different time he thought indeed. But there seemed to be no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the results of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on. Here now a churchyard. The wretched man whose name Scrooge had now to learn lay here, underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw him shape with a new meaning.
Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be? Or are they shadows of things that may be only?
Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name. Ebeneezer Scrooge.
Am I that man who lay upon the bed?
The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again.
No, Spirit! Oh, no, no! Spirit, hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show this to me if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone!
In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration on the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into the bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own, best and happiest of all. The time before him was his own to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. Oh, they are not torn down, my bed curtains. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello! Whoop! Hello there! Oh, there's the saucepan that the gruel was in. Oh, there's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. Oh, there's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. Oh, there's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Oh, I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Oh, never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello there!
Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, bright, clear, jovial, stirring cold, piping for the blood to dance to, golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells, oh, glorious, glorious. Seeing him loitering below, Scrooge called downward to a boy in Sunday clothes.
What's today? Eh? What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day!
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits had done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. My fine fellow, Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It is a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging down now.
Is it? Go and buy it. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give them direction where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shan't know who sends it. It is twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has on its face. It is a wonderful knocker.
Here I am, sir, and here's the turkey.
And here's a half a crown, my lad. Why, it's impossible to carry that turkey to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe."
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Please allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness to accept?
Lord bless me! My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, and not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
Oh, my dear sir, I don't know what to say to such munificence.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
We will.
Thank you. I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro and patted children on the head and questioned beggars. He looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Is your master home, dear?
Oh, yes, sir. He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress. I'll show you upstairs if you please.
Thank you. He knows me. I'll go right in here, my dear.
With his hand already on the dining room lock, he turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door.
Fred?
Why, bless my soul, who's that?
It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in?
Let you in? Yes, come in, and Merry Christmas, Uncle.
It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same as she had during his visit with the ghost, and so did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. But Scrooge was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon, and he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9, no Bob. 1:15, no Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank.
Hello. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary.
Bob trembled a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court for help in a waistcoat. And then with an earnestness that could only be mistaken or not mistaken, Scrooge clapped him on the back and said,
A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I will raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Now, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more.
And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew.
Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them.
For he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset.
And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as have the malady in less attractive forms.
His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him.
He had no further intercourse with the spirits, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that truly be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone!
God bless us, everyone!
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat